An advertising blitz for Capital One featured a couple of Vikings. And these Vikings would come on screen dressed with the fur of animals that I'm sure they had just killed with their bare hands or clubbed to death with their axes. And the Vikings would come and they would speak to us as cost-conscious Nordic warriors. And they came as people who were happy because they had low credit card interest rates. The Vikings would poke fun at the apparent difficulty of cashing in on other companies' frequent flyer miles or accruing points through using their credit card. Every one of the commercials ended with the same catchy tagline: "What's in your wallet?" It's an interesting question. What is in your wallet? The stuff in our wallet represents our financial security, our purchase power, our prosperity. And the question, what is in your wallet, given by those Vikings, was seeking to plant doubt in the mind of those who was hearing this commercial. They wanted you to doubt about the sufficiency of your ability to purchase what you want. They wanted you to doubt about whether you can achieve the satisfaction that you know you want in your life. They wanted you to ask the question, is there more out there that I don't have yet? Do I have what it takes to be successful? And of course, Capital One, through these Vikings, wanted you to think that their Capital One premium card, or whatever that card was the gateway to satisfaction in life. And so they would come on screen and ask, what is in your wallet? At the core of this ad is an existential challenge, i.e., a challenge about who you are, what you mean, what life is, at the core of a credit card. But those of us who have traveled life's road, even for a little bit, have bumped into a truth. And the truth may be inconvenient or it may be freeing, depending on who you are. And that truth is that the stuff in our wallet does not, in the final analysis, bring the lasting happiness we may be looking for. And so back to Capital One's question. What is in your wallet? Great question. What is in your wallet? It's a question also of allegiance and identity. Who are you aligned to? Where does your identity spring up from? And we ask this question as we conclude our series on the three angels' messages as told in Revelation chapter 14 from verse 6 through to 12. And as we explore the third angel's message, the final message of these angels proclaiming to the entire world, we come to angel number 3. And for those of us who haven't been here for the last 2 weeks, a quick recap for you. The last book of the Bible is called the Book of Revelation. It's a book that has been given a bad rap because it has been colonized and stolen by people who seek to use the book to inject fear, to inject trepidation, and to inject strange, weird ideas about God and who Jesus is. And yet the revelation of Jesus Christ, the book's own name, it's an unveiling of who Jesus is. And so the last book, Revelation, holds a special significance for Seventh-day Adventists who base our identity and our mission right in these messages. And we've discovered through the proclamation of the first angel's message that Jesus is radically committed to you. Jesus gives us the good news of his love, and when we receive the good news of his love and lavish attention toward us, it compels us as an overflow to worship him as he ministers on our behalf even now in heaven. We learned through the second angel's message that a system called Babylon, a system that began in eternity past in Genesis, matured in the empire of Babylon, comes again at the end of the world, and this system presents a false view of God, and that view is that you cannot trust God. God is out to gyp you. God is out to make sure that your life is not as fun or as good as it possibly could be. And therefore, because you cannot trust God, you have to gain your own salvation through your work and through your hands. And we are told that that system, Babylon, one day will meet its end. And then we come to the third angel's message. And this final message, brothers and sisters of Volunteer Park, is a startling and unvarnished warning. Turn with me to Revelation 14, verse 9, and let's read it together. I want you to feel the rawness of John, the writer of Revelation, when under the Spirit of God, he pens this message of the third angel. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 9. It says, "Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb." Verse 11, "And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." Wow. What an unnerving message. As I read this text over and over this week, I struggled and wrestled with the question, where is the hope of Jesus in the third angel's message? Where is the hope that we can gain when we leave these doors today? As we read that there are people who at some point in history, before Jesus comes, who will suffer and be tormented with fire and brimstone. Where is the hope? John, where is the hope? Did we really need the third angel's message? Where is the hope? The final message of the third angel, like the whole book of Revelation, is just, we spoke about it as being a patchwork, like a quilt that you make from other pieces of material and you bring together. The book of Revelation is a patchwork of allusions and references from the Old Testament. Over 50% of the book of Revelation is alluded to in the Old Testament. And so when I came to the third angel's message, I start to wonder, what is John trying to tell us? We even read in the third angel's message about the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast, a phrase which has caused many people sleepless nights, caused some people to reject credit cards when they first came out because they thought maybe that is the mark of the beast. A phrase that has caused some people to reject social security cards because they thought maybe that is the mark of the beast. A phrase which has essentially sprung out some of the weirdest, wackiest conspiratorial guesses about what the mark of the beast is and what will lead to those who are punished being in that state. So a few things as we try to unpack the third angel's message. The first thing to know is that the issue in all three angels' messages is worship. What is the issue? The issue is worship. The issue is who we are worshiping. The first angel calls us to worship our good God and speaks about the everlasting gospel that is in the entire Bible and does not change once we come to Revelation. And then the third angel's messages tells us the opposite, that if you worship the beast and you don't worship God, there are consequences. Flip back one chapter to Revelation chapter 13 and read verse 15 with me. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 15. Here we find, let's read it first. It says, he, speaking about the beast, was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not do what? Worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. And so we find in Revelation chapter 13, the same beast that is in Revelation 14 forces and coerces worship. Forces and coerces worship. Now, I know that it's difficult when we get in Revelation and there are beasts and image to the beast and there are dragons and angels to stick with the message at the core of it. And so I'm going to try really hard to give you what I think the third angel's message is driving us to understand about God and about ourselves in the context of this good news. And so here we find that this beast calls for worship, and it's based on fear and it's based on force. The sign that you are worshiping the beast instead of beauty, I'm going to use that analogy now, beauty and the beast. The beast is the beast. God is beauty. So the sign you are worshiping the beast instead of beauty, who is God, is that you receive a mark on your hand and on your forehead. And as John is using this word, he uses the same word that Caesar would use to mark his coins. And so it's something permanent, and it shows who you are identifying with. As the beast forcefully coerces people to receive this mark, he promises them that if you worship me, the beast, and you become aligned with me, you receive a benefits package which is out of this world. You know, when you have a job, you ask what the benefits are. Some jobs will say, hey, you can work remotely 2 days a week. That's a benefit. Or we will match your 401k up to 50%. That would be a great benefit. I see some heads like, hey, where can I get a job like that? Or some will tell you that a benefit of being with them is stock options. And here the beast tells us in Revelation chapter 13, verse 7, that if you worship him, you receive a benefits package that includes economic flourishing and food security. Follow me now. Worshipping the beast becomes a pathway to becoming privileged with access to the things, the stuff that makes middle class America and most of the Western world feel like life is worth living. And so if you follow the beast, you will be set for life. You will not have to worry about where your next meal comes from. You will not have to worry about being able to buy or sell or cash in your stock options or have a plump retirement plan, because you will be taken care of. If you do this, you will gain this. If you worship the beast, you will gain economic flourishing and food security. And it's interesting because many times when we read what the beast offers at the end of the world, we wonder, why would people do that? And I think that question comes from people who may have never had to go without. This week, we were up at a food bank in Queen Anne, which is Lower Queen Anne, which is about 5 minutes away from the Space Needle. And as we were volunteering there for the afternoon, we were asked the question about what is poverty? For us, poverty may conjure an image, and that image may be of someone in a doorway sleeping rough without the ability to eat. And the person at the food bank shared with us that for some people, or in fact, no, he shared a specific example. There was a lady with a single child, and she had a full-time job, owned her own apartment, had a car. And one day she went to sleep, left the stove on, and you can guess where this story is going. Her apartment caught on fire. And because she didn't have the appropriate insurance, she lost everything. And in one day went from being a regular person with the means and the ability to support herself economically and to have food security to being someone who had absolutely nothing. And there are some people who don't even have the ability to have a roof over their head to get burnt in the first place. There are some people who create tent communities under bridges in Seattle or find park benches that they can call their home. There are some people who have to stand at the end of off exits with cardboard signs so they can find their next meal. And so when we read that this beast power is offering benefits package of aligning with him, this isn't a small thing to be skipped over. This is crucial, and it's a serious decision. And in Revelation chapter 13, we read that most people, when the time comes, the choice will be to worship this beast power rather than to prostrate before beauty. And they will be driven by fear and by trying to save themselves. Let me see how we can take that and minimize that. When fear shapes our life, when our lives are contoured by fear, when our safety becomes our God, the ultimate thing that we worship, we begin to move away from worship of God and start to worship a risk-free and comfortable life. When fear becomes the thing that shapes our life and safety becomes our God, then we risk worshiping a life that is easy and smooth and risk-free. And when we come to Revelation chapter 14, we read about a group of people who have heard the proclamation of the gospel and they have said yes. They have heard what Jesus Christ is telling them, and in light of the fact that if they choose Jesus Christ, they may be sacrificing economic prosperity, food security, and even their own life, they still choose God. And as I read the third angel's message, and as I read the punishment and the reward for those who do not follow God, an idea starts to come in my mind about what it may mean to be those people at the end of Revelation 14 that John says, here is the patience of the saints, here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. It starts to tell me that those who reject the beast and follow God are people who have deep and abiding trust, not in what they can do for themselves, but in what God can and promises to do for them. And so even if we take the minutia, the details of this prophetic book, and we strip it down, the question is, who is not in your wallet, but who is in your heart? Because as your heart goes, your mind follows and your actions become. So who is in your heart? Who reigns supremely in your heart? Do you worship God as creator, like the first angel message proclaims, or do you worship fear and security and try to make life work by yourself? Revelation chapter 14 verse 10 says that the consequences of choosing the beast instead of beauty is a cup. And that cup is filled with God's wrath and has awful consequences. Revelation chapter 14 verse 8 tells us that Babylon, who is aligned with this beast, makes all nations also drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And so it seems that John is making some kind of parallel between the cup of Babylon's wrath and the cup of God's wrath. And this may be a an incomplete metaphor, but it seems to me that this is like Isaac Newton's third law. Who is closest to high school here? Who remembers Isaac Newton's third law? What's Isaac Newton's third law? If you know it, you can shout it out. You will get an extra scoop of whatever we serve for potluck. What is Isaac Newton's third law? As soon as I say it, you will know. All right, here goes. For every action, there you go. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And so it seems to me that the wrath of God is being described in Revelation 14 is the consequence of drinking of the wine of Babylon. So in Revelation 14, it says that she makes, this is Babylon, drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So those who choose to drink of the false teaching about who God is, about how you gain salvation, those who are coercive, those who dominate, those who go against the grain of the universe of God's love and drink Babylon's wine, automatically, this is the opposite and equal reaction, automatically drink of God's wrath. So if you choose one, you've chosen the other. Does that make sense? So it isn't, because I really struggled with this. We speak about a God who is love. We speak about the universe bending toward love. Ellen White begins Patriarchs and Prophets with the 3 words, God is love. She ends the great controversy with 3 words, God is love. And yet we are here in Revelation and we are reading about God who is wrathful and who is burning people seemingly forever. And the tension here is thick. I mean, how do you reconcile these things? And one way, I'm not saying this is the only way, it seems to me is that if you take of the cup of the wine of Babylon and you become drunk with false ideas about who God is, you become alienated from who God is, and you choose to reject God in the face of evidence, you automatically choose to drink of the wine of his wrath. To misunderstand God and become intoxicated leads to self-salvation. And the language which speaks about the wrath of God is making allusions to the book of Isaiah and Genesis, where God speaks about entire cities suffering his wrath and burning forever. But when you go and read those texts, you find that the burning forever is speaking about a work which has eternal consequences as opposed to burning eternally. There is a text in Isaiah which speaks about a city burning forever. And in the immediate verse which follows, it then talks about jackals and hyenas inhabiting the land. And so if the city and the place is burning forever, there will be no animals. So when God speaks about wrath and about a punishment which seems to go on forever and forever, it's talking about the consequences rather than the action. It's a hyperbolic phrase that the Old Testament uses to let you know God will deal with sin. And for us, and even for people in this world, that is good news. I don't think it's good news if you have a relative that went through Auschwitz, or a relative who was a victim of a school shooting. If you were to tell them that because of love there will be no consequence for what the shooter or the guards did against your family. Even in this world, we believe in justice. We believe in there being a consequence for our actions. And so in the Bible, we have God telling us that one day the universe will be restored to how it was. And the way that restoration will come will be through a cleansing fire. And those who hold on to the sin, those who hold on to false ideas of God, in light of a clear warning about who He is, they will suffer the consequences of their actions. And it's a difficult message, but it's what God tells us. And then Revelation chapter 14, verse 12, is the capstone of the three angels' messages. And it's interesting. This is a text that is really beloved by Adventists. We love this text. I love this text. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. You know, it's a type of text that, unlike the part about the brimstone, you know, you wouldn't have a beginner's class and say, okay, boys and girls, today's memory text is Revelation 14, verse 8. And then you give them, like, the fire and brimstone. I could be wrong, but I don't think any beginner's class or kindergarten has done that. You go home to your mom and dad, and they ask you what you learned in church, and you just start telling them. And you just let all your friends know about the fire and brimstone that's going to happen. No one really does that. But Revelation 14, verse 12, it's a text which some people may embroider on a little doily and, you know, put on a wall in their guest bathroom because it seems so great. Like, here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And yet, the context of this verse tells us that these saints are those who are living witnesses of God. We have discovered over the past 3 weeks that the heart of the beast system of Babylon is relying on yourself and not God. For a religious person, that reliance may look like attending a place of worship each week, speaking in a certain way, dressing in a particular manner, and being sure to have divine wrath when others sin and fall short. And it is done unconsciously to prove to God that they deserve His favor. God, I'm good. Look at me. I'm so good that my spiritual gift is seeing when other people are wrong. I'm so good that I have not missed a day of filling the blank for this amount of years. And so for them, they may be unwittingly relying on themselves as a way to tell God they deserve His favor. It's like accruing mileage on a credit card and then cashing it in and saying, I deserve this. I am now part of the gold club and deserve a free round-trip flight to Honolulu. And so people who are religious unwittingly can accrue all of these brownie points, and I am a religious person, will then use that to try and tell God that we deserve His favor. For the person who is non-religious, it may be charity work, it may be philanthropy, it may be care for the earth or for carbon emissions, a way to save themselves and to tell God, I'm good. I am a great person and I don't need you. And so their good works becomes a way to keep God away. So you do good so you can tell God you don't need Him. And all of these are the very opposite of what Revelation chapter 14, verse 12 tells us. The people who have heard the warning of the first, the second, the third angel don't try and win God's favor with good works, but they accept the goodness of Jesus in their life. Those who are open to the gift of salvation given to them by Christ on the cross are those who stand and are called saints. In Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 8, Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 8, Paul writes this, as was read for us, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and not of yourselves, it is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast." And I read this because if you read through Revelation chapter 14, it struck me that the beast system is made up of people who try to earn salvation by themselves. They tell God they don't need them, but then we come to Revelation 14 verse 12, and we're told the saints are people who keep and have. So they keep the commandments and have the faith of Jesus. That sounds an awful lot like it could be talking about works. And so you could get to the stage where, like the Pharisees, you have 613 commandments that you build as a gate around the 10 commandments so you can be really sure you're keeping all of God's commandments. But this is not what Revelation 14 verse 12 is saying. It cannot be saying that Babylon is about works and working your own way to heaven, but the people who are saints get to heaven because they keep the commandments and have the faith of Jesus. That cannot be what it's saying. And Ephesians chapter 2 tells us that we are saved through what? Through grace, and not of ourselves, lest any should boast. And so those people who are keeping the commandments of God do it not because they want Jesus to give them brownie points and to give them entrance into heaven, but they keep the commandments of Jesus and have the faith of Jesus as an outflow because they are already saved. They have already accepted the gift of God, and therefore, as a natural consequence, as a joyful consequence, they keep God's commandments. There's a big difference if you keep the commandments to be saved, or if you keep the commandments because you accept Jesus' salvation. Matthew 22 and verse 34 helps us understand this concept a little better. Matthew chapter 22, verse 34 to 40. And it says here, "When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees," this is he, the he they're talking about is Jesus. It says they gathered. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" Verse 37, Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." And so when we read, going back to Revelation chapter 14 and verse 12, that we have saints who are keeping the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus, we are speaking about a group of people whose premier, and supreme object of affection is God. We are talking about people who love their neighbor as themselves. And this to me is so important because many times we can swing too far one way or another. So you can have people who, because of the urgency and the apocalyptic speed of revelation, decide I have no time for anyone else. I need to make sure that I spend hours in Bible study, hours in prayer, and keep myself away from anything that could taint me because I need to have the commandments of God on lock. I need to make sure my faith in Jesus is fantastic. And yet Jesus Christ tells us that keeping the commandment of God is first and foremost loving God with all your heart, and what else? Loving your neighbor as yourself. And we learn already in the first angel's message, which alludes to the Sabbath commandment, which Isaiah 58 tells us, in keeping Sabbath, God is not happy with religious service to him if we ignore our brothers and sisters, our widows, our orphans, those who are destitute, those who are on the periphery of society. If we ignore those people, we are not given a fragrant offering to God. God calls it in Isaiah. He says he turns his back toward it. And so even here, at the end of this message, where God is warning that if you worship the beast and not me, the people who trust God, who don't trust themselves, who accept the gift of salvation, those people are loving God with all of their heart. They are looking out for their neighbor. They are conscious of the pain and the hurt in their community. They are still alive to society. They don't run from it, they engage it. They don't just curse it, they light a candle. And for me, this is such an important and crucial part of us as Adventists and as part of our identity, to make sure that love of God and love of man have equal central focus in our mission and in our life. You have, I think the book of either James or 1 John, that says that, 1 John, it says, how can you say you love your brother who you can see? Or how can you say you don't love your brother who you can see, but you say you love me? Man, God is so practical. He's saying, how can you say you love me when the person who is made of flesh and blood that you pass down the steps of your apartment, that you say hello to when you buy your breakfast, you say you love me, but you don't love them. You love me who is invisible and omnipresent, but you're telling me you don't love the person you see each day. God says that doesn't make sense. And that's why Jesus says in Matthew chapter 22 that the keeping of his commandments can be distilled to two things: love God with all of your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, we understand as Adventists that in keeping the commandments of God, we also experience the brilliance and the radiance of celebrating Sabbath. We know that there was a time in Christian history when there was so much confusion about this. And the first angel's message calls us to remember and to celebrate and to keep lives of Sabbath joy. Lives that don't mean you go to Sabbath for 2 hours, you go to Sabbath for 2 hours. You go to church on Sabbath for 2 hours, but for the rest of your life and the rest of your week, you don't live out the principles of the Sabbath. You don't rest in God as the one who has given you salvation. You don't alleviate the poverty and the pain of those around you. You don't live a life that says, I am so excited about the second coming and about heaven that I am going to practice living heaven today. I will not put it off, but I will live it today and rest in Jesus. And so the brilliant radiance of celebration of Sabbath makes us trust God and choose beauty over the beast. And so Revelation chapter 14 and the three angels' message for us should give us hope about the nearness of the coming of God. It should give us hope that it's the gospel that topples Babylon. It should challenge us to understand that Babylon does not fall and come out because necessarily of our words, but because we live lives that are attractive and that compel people to come. Because if we read the Bible carefully, the people who have not yet chosen God are not nameless. They aren't in a vault somewhere. They're not on a jump drive. They are our uncles and cousins and supervisors and foremans and neighbors. They are our children. These people who need to hear the hope of the gospel are real. There should be no joy in hearing about what will happen to those who choose to reject God, but it should compel us to plead with God. It should compel us to live lives of hope that we might attract people to this God that we serve. These people are so loved by God that he sends a worldwide and universal message that they may choose him. And as we sit here this morning, we have the privilege to have lived another day. We have the privilege to have heard God asking us this question, not what is in your wallet, but who is in your heart. Do you trust the goodness and deep love of Jesus, or are you still trying to make it yourself? Do you trust that Jesus' love is enough even today to give you a fresh start, to give you the experience of those who trust Jesus for everything, to give you the experience of Revelation chapter 15, when you have people singing a song of salvation, the song of Moses and the Lamb? Is your heart still open for Jesus to work in you even today? I hope that this week we may live peaceful lives, knowing that through the grace of God, he has saved us. That we may live courageous lives and share our hope in Jesus. Because those who do not choose Jesus, God will suffer with them long. But we have read about the awful consequences. So we might live courageous lives and take the opportunity God gives us to share our faith and our hope in Jesus, the one who is coming. Who is in your heart today? Amen.